least 30 news organizations declined to sign a new Pentagon access policy with added restrictions for journalists ahead of a Tuesday deadline. The new policy says journalists could be branded security risks and have their Pentagon press badges revoked if they ask department employees to disclose classified and some types of unclassified information. Reuters is among the outlets that have refused to sign, citing the threat posed to press freedoms. All 5 major U.S. broadcast networks issued a joint statement on Tuesday, saying the policy was, quote, without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections, and that it would restrict journalists' ability to report on national security issues. The new rules followed weeks of negotiations with Pentagon officials. A lawyer familiar with those talks said the requirement that reporters acknowledge that disclosure of sensitive information could harm U.S. national security could aid prosecutors if they sought to charge a reporter for disclosing defense information under the Espionage Act. At least one organization, conservative cable news outlet One American News, signed on to the new policy. Reuters could not immediately confirm if others had also signed it. The Pentagon's policy is the latest expansion of restrictions on press access under Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has called the requirements common sense, citing national security concerns. U.S. President Donald Trump was asked on Tuesday whether he had spoken to Hegseth about the policy change.
I'll let him speak for himself, but I think he finds the press to be very disruptive in terms of world peace and maybe security for our nation.
Meanwhile, the Pentagon Press Association, which represents more than 100 news organizations that regularly cover the military, including Reuters, has urged Pentagon leadership to reconsider the policy. The department has set a Tuesday deadline for news organizations to agree to it or turn in their Pentagon press badges and clear out their workspaces in the building by Wednesday.
Restrictions on the press that report at the Pentagon, and have you spoken to Secretary Hegseth about this?
I think I can speak for him. I'll let him speak for himself, but I think he finds the press to be very disruptive in terms of world peace and maybe security for our nation. Press is very dishonest. Not you, but the press is very dishonest.
The Pentagon press corps of all press corps would be front and center across the board on wanting to give credit to the president for forging this kind of peace, and instead what they want to talk about is a policy about them.
Well, the Pentagon certainly can restrict the publication of classified information, but unclassified information is something that I think goes too far when it comes to the First Amendment. Journalists have a right to gather news. They have a right to ask questions. They have a right to publish unclassified information.
The First Amendment protects the right of reporters to publish information, even if it's leaked, even if someone broke the law to give it to the reporter, so long as the reporter themselves didn't break the law by asking someone to steal a document. But if the reporter is an innocent recipient of a document that's leaked to them, whether it's classified or unclassified, the First Amendment protects their right to publish that information.
I'll note that this is not coming out of thin air. This is actually, we've been building to this for a while now, back to, as far back as I can recall, to the Bush administration, where there's been sort of this growing control over who reporters can directly talk to get information. There's a term that's been used called censorship by PIO, by Public Information Officer, in which the Defense Department, through the Bush administration, it continued through Obama, through Trump 1, and Biden, were trying to control exactly who reporters could talk to, or if they were allowed to talk to people, had to do it in the presence of a public information officer. All this does tend to chill speech and also restrict what reporters can learn from people who actually know what they're talking about versus somebody who's just trying to control a message.
We have an option here to, as you know, the press years ago moved into the White House. It used to be across the street. We could move them. You're lucky I'm president, because we could move them very easily across the street. They used to be there.
The Trump administration is trying everything they can to control the media, but they won't be able to do that. They just won't. Unless our Supreme Court continues its trend of disregarding the facts and giving Trump everything he wants. But right now the law is very clear that the government can't stop the presses just because they don't like what's being written.
Do you believe that some nuclear capability in Iran remains?
This mission
the logical first step was to refuse to sign, to draw that line and say, we're not going to do this. What's going to happen now? Are you willing to play this out in the public sphere and hope that public opinion is on your side? I think that hopefully the public will recognize the damage this causes to us as a society, that where we can't learn about the activities of government. That's a necessary first step, not just to try to resolve this without going to court, but in case they go to court, they need to show that their work is adversely being affected. So I think it's laying down a marker for an eventual lawsuit that tries to declare these as a violation of the First Amendment.
I don't think there's much legally that the press can do to challenge this. I think this action, though, of solidarity, which we really haven't seen with the press very much, where the press does work, band together and fight these things, as opposed to letting the administration pick on one news organization. This is a good sign that the press is doing this and condemning it publicly and letting the public know, look, your government doesn't want you, the voter and the taxpayer, to know what it's doing, and that's a bad thing.
We, the public, will be the big losers in that, because we're not going to know what's really going on, what money is being spent, what actions are being taken, whether they're legal or not. And so that is a big deal. And I think that I wish the Pentagon would and the Secretary of Defense would take this a little more seriously when it comes to the importance of a free press, when it comes to the importance of the First Amendment, when it comes to the need to oversee the actions of government. Because again, once this is gone, it's gone, and it's hard to get back.
I think it's been degraded or delayed by 1 to 2 years.
I think
been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.